I grew up in a loving and ordinary family, surrounded by good friends. In terms of looks, academics, and sports, I was just average, but I always felt incredibly fortunate to have such good people around me. Perhaps that's why I tend to trust people too much. Because of this, I've often been called naive or even mystical by some. This story is about my pathetic mother-in-law who took advantage of my trusting nature. My name is Mary. I'm 31 years old and I work as a salesperson. My husband Jake and I got married just a year ago, so I still feel like a newlywed. I used to say, let's have a baby, but honestly, I was still enjoying our newlywed life. Jake's parents are still together and live about 20 minutes away from our apartment. His mom, Diane, often invites us over for dinner, and we enjoy a family meal at their house about once a month. Some of my friends have worried, saying, isn't it too much to visit your in-laws that often? But Tom, Jake's dad, is great to talk to, and Diane is sweet, so I've never found it bothersome. Besides, Diane seems to prefer working alone in the kitchen, so I'm always treated like a guest. I used to happily join Jake and Tom in chatting until dinner was served, making it easier than preparing a meal at home. However, there was one thing that concerned me. One evening, we were at the in-laws' house for another family dinner. When I tasted the chicken soup Diane made, I couldn't help but grimace internally. What's wrong, Mary? Jake asked, noticing my hesitation. Oh, nothing, I replied, forcing a smile. I've just never had celery and chicken soup at my parents' place before. It's interesting and delicious, Diane. Thank you. There's plenty more if you'd like, Diane responded, looking pleased. I struggled to keep smiling. Another bowl of that soup would surely send my blood pressure through the roof. It was incredibly salty. I glanced at Jake and Tom, but they seemed to be enjoying it just fine. I realized that this intense flavor was normal home cooking for them. That night, like many before, I forced myself to finish the soup, despite the overwhelming sodium content. Apparently, my in-laws have a preference for extremely strong flavors. Diane's cooking could be as salty as seawater or as sweet as condensed milk. The first time I tasted it, I nearly spit it out, but the rest of the family ate it like any other meal. I was astonished by their taste preferences. I felt bad leaving food uneaten, so I usually ate everything, but it often upset my stomach. The health impact of eating such intensely flavored food regularly became a major concern for me. I consulted with a nutritionist friend and even started collecting recipes and pamphlets, but there was no way a new daughter-in-law could say, your cooking is too rich in flavor. Please modify your recipes. At home, I cooked with normal seasonings, exactly as the recipes instructed, and thought the food tasted good. I often asked Jake, is it good? And he always replied sweetly, whatever you cook is delicious. But considering the rich food he grew up with, I couldn't fully believe he was being honest. Regardless, I prioritized our health and continued to cook with moderate seasonings. There was one more thing that worried me. Diane sometimes served less than fresh food. The rolls of bread on my plate were often dry and hard, and occasionally, the fruit served for dessert was partially rotten. I discreetly removed the bad parts, but it was another source of concern. I couldn't bring myself to eat, but I was increasingly worried that my in-laws might end up with food poisoning sooner or later. Cookies for a snack, Mary, Diane offered. To my horror, I realized the cookies she handed me had expired 6 months ago. Jake noticed too, and quickly spoke up, Mom, these cookies are expired. Diane looked startled and then laughed it off, saying, oh no, I'm so careless. I felt relieved that she didn't seem too concerned, but my relief turned to alarm when I found the same box of expired cookies mixed into the snack bag she gave me on our next visit. I had seen this kind of behavior before, the time my grandma started showing signs of dementia. Could it be happening to Diane too? She was only in her 50s, but I began to doubt whether her forgetfulness was just carelessness or something more serious. I wanted to talk to Jake about Diane's overly seasoned food and the possibility that she might be showing early signs of dementia, but I was afraid it would be too much for him to handle. Then one day, a small miracle happened. We found out I was pregnant. I'm finally going to be a dad. Do you think it's a boy or a girl? Jake asked excitedly, stroking my belly every day. When should we tell our parents? Should we wait until the end of the first trimester? He continued. Well, the doctor just confirmed the heartbeat, but I want them to know in case something happens. We'll tell them after the 12-week checkup. I replied, I guess we just have to wait and see. I can't wait to tell everyone. I think my mom's going to cry when she hears the news, Jake said, his excitement infectious. You're right, I agreed, imagining Diane's tears of joy when she found out. It filled me with warmth and happiness. I was so thrilled about the pregnancy that I pushed my concerns aside. But the following weekend, when I saw Diane's chicken soup on the table, it hit me that there was a serious problem. If I ate her overly seasoned food, it might affect my baby. The pregnancy books I'd been reading warned that high blood pressure and diabetes could impact the health of both the mother and the baby. And what about stale bread and expired foods? They might not have harmed me before, but they could pose a risk to my unborn child. The thought made me anxious, and I couldn't bring myself to start eating. Oh no, Mary, you haven't eaten at all, Diane remarked, noticing my untouched plate. I hope it wasn't too bad for your taste, Diane said, glancing at my plate and frowning. Oh, no, it's not that, I quickly responded, but before I could explain, Jake jumped in, thinking it was morning sickness. She's just tired and doesn't have much of an appetite, he said, trying to save me. I see. Are you working too hard, Mary? Don't push yourself too much, Tom said kindly, while Diane's expression remained grim. Thank you, I replied, feeling guilty for leaving the food and lying to them. After everyone else finished their meal, Diane brought me a large brownie topped with ice cream and a cup of tea. Have some sweets at least. I'm sure it'll help you relax, she said, smiling. Thank you so much. What a thoughtful gesture, I said, deciding to at least take a bite. But recently, sweets have been giving me heartburn. I noticed Jake had a smaller piece without ice cream. I whispered to Jake so Diane wouldn't hear from the kitchen. Jake, can I switch with yours? Ha! Oh, sure, he replied, handing me his plate. I cut a small piece of the brownie. It was moist and soft, and I washed it down with tea. But as Jake cut into his piece, he frowned. This brownie is a little hard, he remarked. Just as he was about to take a bite, Diane suddenly burst out of the kitchen, shouting, No, 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 no. My heart jumped at her outburst. Jake looked equally puzzled as Diane snatched the brownie from his hand. Why are you eating Mary's brownie? I gave it to her, she exclaimed, clearly upset. Does it really matter who eats it? Jake asked, confused. Yes, it does. This one is outdated, Diane revealed, leaving us all in stunned silence. Her unexpected revelation hung in the air, leaving us both shocked and confused. I didn't notice the brownie was old because the ice cream was melting on top, I said, hoping to diffuse the tension. But my words only seemed to confirm Diane's intent. Jake turned to his mother, his voice calm but filled with a quiet fury that made the moment even more chilling. So you tried to hide the staleness by adding ice cream, didn't you, Mom? Diane's face went pale as she realized the severity of the situation. She scrambled to defend herself. No, that's not it. It's old, but it's still good, so I wanted Mary to have it. Jake wasn't convinced. Then why did you stop me so forcefully from eating it? You gave it to Mary knowing it wasn't safe. No way, Diane stammered, her voice trembling. Suddenly, it all clicked and a shiver ran down my spine as I pieced everything together. You've been feeding me stale food and giving me expired snacks on purpose, haven't you? What? Tom, who had been silent until now, glared at Diane with an intensity that sent chills through the room. What's going on, honey? Diane, visibly shaken, tried to explain herself. It wasn't on purpose. I just had some leftovers, and I didn't want to waste them, so I gave them to Mary. That's what you call on purpose, Jake shot back, his voice cold. I can't think of any good reason to make someone else eat food you don't want. But she's not really our family, Diane muttered, her voice barely audible. She's an outsider, so why not give her the old food? Jake's eyes narrowed. You became part of my family too, but you were never treated like that. No, but... Diane's voice faltered as she banged on the table in a panic, her composure unraveling. As I watched her, my heart sank. The Diane I thought I knew was nowhere to be found. I had loved Diane so much, but now I was deeply disappointed. I wondered if everything I believed about her kindness was just an illusion. The more I thought about her betrayal, the more disgusted I felt. She now seemed like a distressed demon, scrambling to make excuses. But there was something else gnawing at me. Was it really harmless? Could it be that the intense flavors in your food were intentional too? What? What are you talking about? Tom and Jake looked at her in disbelief. Diane's expression faltered, revealing a hint of guilt. Jake grabbed my bowl of chicken soup despite Diane's desperate attempt to stop him. Don't, Jake. Ignoring her, he took a spoonful and immediately spat it out. This tastes like seawater. Tom, now suspicious, tried a spoonful from the untouched side of the bowl and scolded, Mary, have you always been eating this kind of food? Yes, I replied, feeling a wave of realization wash over me. I thought this was just how things were here, especially since you and Jake seemed to eat it without issue. That's because ours was normal, Jake said quietly, the weight of the situation sinking in. I see, so that's how it was. Seeing my realization, Jake's shoulders slumped as if the strength had been drained from him. How could you not notice? Was it more than just bad flavor? She's even been giving you expired snacks, Tom added, his anger evident. I thought she might have dementia. I confess, my voice trembling. Diane's mouth twitched in response. For a daughter-in-law she despised to the point of malice to think she had dementia, a condition she found humiliating, was a deep insult to her. How pathetic, Jake said, his voice gentle as he turned to me. You're so sweet, putting up with all of this because you thought she was sick. He then turned to Diane, his tone growing cold. But you, Mom, I can't believe you've been bullying such a good person who trusted you so much. Tom and Jake's disappointment hung heavily in the air, making the tension unbearable. Diane, once a figure I admired, now seemed like a stranger, her true nature finally revealed. I never imagined Diane could be this kind of person. That's why I consulted so many people, saying things like, Diane's taste buds seem off, and I'm worried about her health. She's still in her 50s, but she's showing signs of dementia. Dementia. Diane's expression quickly changed, a flicker of panic crossing her face as she realized her actions hadn't gone unnoticed. Yes, I talked to many people, my parents, friends, even some colleagues at work. I continued, pulling out a stack of pamphlets from my bag. They were also helpful, giving me tips and resources. Here, take a look. I handed the pamphlets over, piling them on the table. I had been carrying them around, intending to discuss this with Tom and Jake someday. I never expected they'd come in handy in this way. Wow, you were really worried about her, Tom said, unfolding a pamphlet as if touched by my concern. But Diane was furious. You're terrible. I'm not sick, she shouted. No, it's you who are terrible, Jake snapped back. Unlike you, she has a pure heart. She was sincerely concerned about you. Shut up, shut up. Diane screamed, her voice shaking with rage. I never liked her from the beginning. She pointed at me, her eyes burning with anger. You, with your dumb face, took my beloved son away from me. He didn't even notice the harassment. Are you serious? You're an idiot if you can't see what an amazing woman Jake married. Tom shot back. You were fooled by your own jealousy. What? Diane was taken aback, her fury momentarily halted. In front of me, my in-laws were locked in a fierce argument. It was shocking and painful to see someone I once trusted turn against me so viciously. As I lay in bed that night, Jake whispered to me, Why didn't you tell me before we got married? If I had known. Diane, overhearing, looked momentarily hopeful, as if hoping for some redemption, but Jake's disappointment was clear. The rift between us all had deepened, and there was no going back. I knew it. Jake was on my side. If I had known earlier, he said quietly, I would have cut ties. Ignoring Diane's despair, Jake held me tightly. I'm sorry, Mary. I didn't realize how much you were going through. I'm sorry too, I replied, for not recognizing her true intentions sooner. Diane's eyes twitched, clearly shocked to hear such words from someone she had always looked down on. I married you because you were pure and kind, Jake continued. Don't worry, we'll never come here again. Wait, Diane pleaded, her voice desperate. You can't do this. I'm your mother. You were a terrible mother, Jake said firmly. I'll never let you see your grandchild. A grandchild? Diane's eyes widened as she finally noticed my belly. If only she had realized earlier, before her schemes consumed her, things might have turned out differently. Let's go, Mary, Jake said, extending his hand. I took it and slowly stood up. Wait, I'm sorry. Diane cried out, rushing to grab Jake's arm. It was just a small mistake. But Jake dismissed her, turning to me. I'm not the one you should be apologizing to. Diane glanced at me, her eyes full of disgust. I couldn't bring myself to forgive someone who had harbored such malice against me. Before she could say another word, I spoke up. I trusted you completely, and you betrayed that trust. I can never trust you again, not for the rest of my life. I won't allow someone like you near my precious child. Goodbye." "No?" Diane collapsed in anguish as we walked away without looking back. Tom, watching us leave, seemed to understand that we would never return. It's strange to think about it now, but if only Diane had cherished our relationship, she could have lived a happy life as a grandmother surrounded by her grandchildren. What a tragic mistake she made. When I finally told my parents and friends who had supported me, they all seemed relieved. "You finally realized," they said, some stunned, others nodding knowingly. Apparently, everyone but me had been aware that I was being mistreated, but they hadn't said anything because they knew how genuinely concerned I was about Diane. At least they had listened to me, collecting pamphlets and offering advice, waiting for the day to see the truth for myself. When that day finally came, I felt a wave of shame and embarrassment. My face burned with it. But thanks to the mountain of material everyone had given me, I was able to prove that my concern had been genuine. Because of their help, Jake and Tom were completely on my side. I realized then just how blessed I was by the people around me. Now, 2 years later, my life has taken a different turn. I've been busy taking care of my little son, who is celebrating his first birthday today. I'm hard at work preparing a birthday cake, fried chicken, and other dishes I'm not accustomed to making. Jake has been a great dad, playing with our son and changing his diaper. In the midst of this, I get a call from Tom. He was invited to the birthday party, so I pick up the phone without hesitation, assuming he might need to ask me something. "Hello, Mary," says the voice on the other end, sweet and probing. It's not Tom. Even after 2 years, I recognize Diane's voice instantly. After we cut ties, we moved to a new place far away from her and only told Tom. I blocked Diane's number and had mine erased from her phone. Thanks to Jake and Tom acting as shields, I didn't have to endure an unwelcome visit at the hospital when I gave birth. I've been able to live a peaceful life, and now she wants to ruin it. Just hearing her voice sends a shiver down my spine. "Where's Tom?" I ask. "He's in the bathroom right now," she replies. "Isn't it my grandson's birthday today?" I don't think Tom told her, but she might have noticed him discreetly preparing a gift. Jake senses something's wrong from my tone and gestures to take over the phone. Worry etched on his face, but I give him a thumbs up, indicating I've got this. I continue the call, knowing that the innocent, naive wife I once was is a thing of the past. "Listen, Mary," Diane begins. I genuinely feel terrible about what happened. Diane's voice trembled with regret. "I was wrong to do such mean things, and I regret it deeply." "Ha!" I replied, uncertain of her sudden change of heart. "I want to see my grandson soon. I'll buy him lots of cute clothes and toys." Diane continued, her voice trying to sound hopeful. "Okay, but I don't need you to hide needles in the toys or anything like that," I said firmly. "No, I wouldn't do something so horrible," Diane protested. "I mean, you think I'd do that after all those accusations?" "You fit me all those disgusting things," I countered. "It wasn't just a little too much salt or sugar. It was unhealthy and potentially dangerous." "But I really regret it," she insisted. "You're kind enough to understand that, right?" "I'm often told I'm kind," I said, "but it's not just kindness. I'm just too trusting. Once someone betrays that trust, it's gone forever." "So you'll never regain my trust," I told her firmly, "and I won't forgive you. I'll never let you see my precious son." "Wait, Mary." Diane's voice cut off as I ended the call. I could hear Tom and Diane yelling at each other on the other end. I hung up, feeling a mix of relief and sadness. "Sorry for that," I said quietly to Jake. "You're getting stronger, Mary," Jake said, his voice filled with pride as he placed a comforting hand on my shoulder. Of course, I am his mother. My son looked content lying in his crib, and when he saw me, he flapped his little hands happily. I picked him up, rubbing my cheek against his soft, tiny body, which still carried a faint scent of milk. His eyes reflected pure joy as he looked at me, filling me with a wave of protective, maternal love. I've outgrown the gentle, naive wife I once was. Now, I'm determined to be strong and vigilant to protect my family. "Oh, it smells so good," I said, noticing the birthday cake was almost ready. My son's happy coos made us both smile broadly. In the past, I was carefree and blissfully unaware of others' malice, but that was because of the people who shielded me. Now, it's my turn to protect my family. I'm resolved to be strong so that these happy days can continue for a long time. I bought a high-rise condo across from the station, but suddenly he brought up this story. "Why now?" It was surprising because he had purchased the condo behind my back while I was staying at my parents' house. It's an amazing place with a stunning view and spotless rooms, but I was in shock. He moved out of our apartment and into this luxurious condo without any explanation or apology, saying he used money from selling our old place. He told me, "I'm going to live with mom and dad in this great house, so I don't need a parasite like you." It was outrageous. He decided to live with his parents without consulting me and kicked me out. I was speechless, not knowing where to begin. My name is Sarah. I'm a 32-year-old housewife, 8 months pregnant, eagerly counting down the days until I meet my baby. My husband, Richard, is 35 and works for a major company. We've been married for 3 years, and I was thrilled to finally be pregnant after struggling to conceive. However, I was also terrified of childbirth. To ease my anxiety, I spent time at my in-laws' home. "Sarah, you're about to have a baby soon, huh? What's it like to become a mother?" Jane, Richard's brother's wife, asked me. Jane is the reason I visit my in-laws. She's a housewife and lives with them, and I've grown close to her. My mother-in-law had trouble with her legs 2 years ago, and Jane, who has caregiving experience, agreed to help. She's quite capable but is always there to assist. Her kindness impressed me, and as a more experienced mother, she helped ease my worries about childbirth. Now, with only a month left until my due date, I plan to stay at my parents' house to prepare for the birth. Although my belly felt heavy, I enjoyed shopping for the baby and imagining our new life. Spending time at my parents' home felt refreshing after a long while. 2 days past my due date, contractions started, and I tried reaching Richard, but he didn't answer. I was concerned he might be busy or in trouble. As my labor pains intensified, I focused solely on giving birth. Eventually, I welcomed a beautiful baby girl into the world. I cradled my beautiful baby girl for the first time, overwhelmed with happiness. Richard was supposed to be there for the birth, but he didn't show up at the hospital. I was too exhausted from labor to confront him directly, so I simply texted him to let him know I had given birth and then fell asleep. When I woke up, I heard someone calling my name. "Are you still asleep?" Richard's voice was grating. I blinked open my eyes to find him standing by my bed, with his parents in tow. He greeted me cheerfully. "My parents came. You have to appreciate them." I had specifically asked not to have visitors immediately after giving birth, so I was taken aback that he had brought his parents along without asking me. Irritated, I asked, "Why didn't you come yesterday?" He responded casually, "I promised to go eat sushi with my parents. I thought I'd come after that, but I drank a lot and figured it would be better not to come and be a trouble." I couldn't believe his priorities. While he enjoyed sushi and drinks, I was left to struggle through childbirth alone. Ignoring my irritation, he asked, "Where's our baby?" "She's in the nursery, a healthy baby girl," I replied. My mother-in-law's face tightened at the news. "What a girl," she muttered. "Such a useless wife." I was stunned by her comment. My father-in-law chimed in. Both Jane and Sarah blew it. "You're pathetic." I was hurt and furious that, instead of receiving gratitude for enduring childbirth, I was insulted. Richard, too, seemed disappointed. "Oh, damn it. I knew it was a girl, but I hoped for a boy." I got my hopes up. I didn't understand his disappointment. He explained that his parents had high hopes for a boy since our first child was a girl, but that didn't matter to me. To me, my baby was perfect, no matter her gender. Richard's reaction left me feeling alone and unsupported, as he seemed more aligned with his parents' expectations than with celebrating our new arrival. I was fuming with anger, but exhaustion and soreness from childbirth made it hard to muster the energy to confront Richard. Thankfully, a nurse who had overheard our conversation through the wall intervened and asked his parents to leave the room. She noticed my distress and offered me comfort as I cried. Since then, Richard hadn't visited me in the hospital. On the day of my discharge, I arranged for my parents to pick us up and take us to their home. I didn't want to return to our place in such a state. I couldn't understand why Richard had become so cold-hearted. He seemed so much more caring when we first married. I wondered if his change in demeanor was linked to his work issues from 2 years ago. He had made a significant mistake that caused a huge loss for his company. Though his colleagues covered for him, he never faced any real consequences. Still, the error derailed his career, and he had struggled to get back on track. His frustration and stress may have contributed to his emotional distance. Additionally, one of his colleagues, who had joined the company later, was now his boss. Richard had been better at his job initially, but their roles reversed due to his earlier mistake. The reversal must have been hard for him to accept, adding to his stress and affecting his behavior at home. I felt a mix of dissatisfaction and hope that having our baby would spark some change in him, but he didn't seem to be making any effort. I worried about our family's future and felt overwhelmed by the uncertainty. Then Richard called me unexpectedly. "Hey, when are you coming back? You've been gone for almost a month since the baby was born." I wasn't ready to go back yet. "Sorry, I'll be home soon. I need to get things in order for our daughter and start fresh." Richard's response was shocking. "You don't need to bring all that stuff back. I actually just wanted to discuss something with you. Maybe I should have told you this in person rather than over the phone." I was stunned and confused by his abruptness. What did he mean? I was completely baffled by what Richard was saying. Then he dropped an even more shocking revelation. "I bought a high-rise condo across from the station." I was stunned. "Wait, what do you mean?" I asked, trying to make sense of his sudden announcement. Why was he bringing this up now? He described the condo's stunning view and immaculate rooms, but I was confused. He had moved out of our apartment and into this luxury condo without telling me while I was staying at my parents' house. I was flabbergasted. Where did the money come from? You shouldn't be able to afford that on your salary. He made no apologies and simply said, "I used the money from selling our house." I needed clearer explanations, not just bits of information. "You sold our house. Where are your parents living now?" He seemed oddly pleased as he replied, "Daddy and Mommy are living with me in the condo now. I'm moving in with them, so I don't need a parasite like you. Get out." I was left speechless, unsure how to react. Richard had decided to live with his parents without consulting me and had kicked me out. He called his parents Daddy and Mommy with a new sense of familiarity and announced they were living together in the condo. He practically asked for a divorce. As I stood there, dumbfounded, he continued, "You're so arrogant for a housewife. You're useless without my salary. You've got a dead weight lately, especially with your morning sickness." I tried to explain that I had been busy right up until giving birth, but he wouldn't listen. He added, "And our baby isn't a boy. My parents think it's better to be with a younger woman who might give them a boy. They also don't want to live with you and my brother anymore." He told me he had put my things in a storage room and instructed me to pick them up. "As for the divorce, I've already sent you the papers. Make sure to file them." And with that, he hung up on me. I was stunned and paralyzed by the shock. How had I ended up married to someone so callous? I felt like I had made a terrible mistake, but there was no point in dwelling on it now. My priority was my daughter. I had to pull myself together for her sake. After taking some time to process everything, I resolved to sever all ties with Richard and begin a new chapter in my life. I was determined not to let him control me any longer. If a divorce was what it took, then so be it. I would show him who would truly regret this decision. My parents were furious when I told them about the situation. They immediately agreed to support me through the divorce. As soon as I received the divorce papers from Richard, I signed and filed them. About 2 weeks later, Richard unexpectedly showed up at my parents' house. "Hey, what's going on?" he demanded. "Why has so much money been withdrawn from my bank account?" He slammed his bank statements onto the table, glaring at me. I remained calm and replied, "Aren't you familiar with the term division of property?" "What's that supposed to mean?" he retorted, baffled. "That's not what this is. The account in question is mine," I said firmly. "I'm not giving you a cent. I had previously deposited some money into your account, but it was shared property. I'm taking back what's rightfully mine." He was infuriated. "Why should I give you my money? You've forgotten that your salary went down because of your mistake at work. I started a side job at home. I'm sure you didn't earn as much as I did." "Actually, I earned as much as you did," I countered, "and you're the one who wanted the divorce. This conversation is over." Richard was incredulous. "You've got to be kidding me. I don't believe this." My father, who had been silent until then, finally spoke up. "How about we take this to court?" "How dare you insult my daughter?" I couldn't help but feel a pang of sympathy for my daughter, who had endured so much because of Richard. "Get out of here, you bastard," I shouted. My father, a policeman, intimidated by Richard's menacing demeanor, made him flee from our house. That was the final end to our relationship, and the asset division issues were resolved. Since then, I've been focusing on raising my daughter at my parents' house. Adjusting to parenting has been a challenge, but she is an absolute joy. My life has taken on a new, happier rhythm with my adorable baby girl. A few months later, I started receiving persistent calls from an unknown number. Though I had ignored them initially, I decided to answer, thinking it might be my boss or colleagues. "Hello," I answered. "Hello, Sarah." It was Richard. "What you want?" I asked sharply. "How are you doing?" he asked. "I don't really want to discuss that." "Can I hang up now?" "Wait, can you come back? I'm having trouble paying the mortgage on the condo. I might get kicked out." I wasn't surprised. "You're short on cash, aren't you?" "Yeah, I've used up all my savings. Daddy hurt his back and had to quit his job. Mommy brags about her life, but now she's always sick. I'm at my wit's end." I wasn't shocked by his predicament. With his salary, he likely couldn't manage the condo's mortgage. He must have relied on his savings, his father's salary, and a down payment. Now that his father couldn't work and his mother spent extravagantly, he was struggling to cover their expenses. It was no wonder he was in trouble. When I checked my bank balance, it was at zero. I was informed that if I didn't pay by next week, I would be evicted. "Please come back, Sarah. We used to care about each other." I laughed, finding his pleas almost amusing. "Give me a break. You just want to exploit me whenever you need something. You expect me to support you and act as your housekeeper." Richard fell silent, and I remembered how he had called me a parasite. Wouldn't I just be in the way? I retorted, recalling the hurtful words he had used before. I had something weighing on my mind. "What about Jane and your brother?" "They've already moved out and are living together now," he said. "He had a falling out with our parents when my brother told Dad to live more appropriately. My brother lost his temper and said, 'I don't want to be told what to do by someone who's dependent on a woman who couldn't even give him a son.' Usually calm, my brother blew up. He left the house saying, 'I'll cut you off if you keep making fun of my wife.'" "I see. It sounds like he's a decent person. It's good to know he cares about Jane," I responded. "Please come back, Sarah." "Are you serious? Who would ever return to you? I'm fully occupied with taking care of my daughter. I can't deal with jerks like you. By the way, calling your parents daddy and mommy at your age is pathetic," I added. "Don't say stuff like that. You can take our daughter here if you want. Weren't you supposed to live with our daughter when you first asked me?" "Oh, I see. You don't even remember. You had your daughter, didn't you? I would never take her to a father like you. Don't ever call me again. If you show up again, I'll call the police and my dad will make sure you get arrested." He made a pathetic sound, clearly recalling my dad's intimidating presence. I hung up and blocked him. Later, he tried calling me from a new number, but I had changed mine too. A bit later, Jane contacted me. "I'm sorry for not reaching out sooner. We moved to the countryside, and it took us a while to get internet access set up." Jane and her family had decided to live in a peaceful, rural setting. I visited their new home and found it to be a charming town surrounded by nature. I imagined how happy and well-adjusted my child would be growing up in such an environment. Jane's husband filled me in on my ex. He and his family were eventually evicted from their high-rise condo and burdened with debt. He was struggling to support his parents and barely making ends meet. In contrast, I was thriving. I worked from home and lived comfortably at my parents' house. Today, I was going to relax at Jane's place for a few days before returning to spend more time with my daughter. Once my daughter was a bit older, I hoped we could move to the area and live near Jane. With that bright future in mind, I happily enjoyed my time. Buying a high-rise condo while your wife is pregnant is insane. Maybe if you're rich, but it's ridiculous on a normal income, I thought. I was relieved to have left such an unlikable husband behind. I wished Jane and her family all the best, hoping they would continue to live harmoniously together. Thank you for watching to the end. If you enjoyed this, please subscribe to our channel. See you in the next video. This is the last gift I'll ever give you, my husband sneers, shoving divorce papers across the table. I've decided to marry someone else, so thanks for being my cash dispenser all these years. The man I've spent so many years with turns out to be a terrible person, and this is the story of my revenge. My name is Jessica, and I'm about to turn 50. Tomorrow is a significant day for me, not just because of my birthday, but because I will finally be free from the debt that has burdened me for so long. My husband, Lance, and I have worked hard together for the last 2 decades. We married when I was 30 and he was 35. He had inherited a liquor store from his parents, who had passed away while I was an office worker at the time. We met through a mutual acquaintance and quickly began dating, with marriage already in mind. But I had one concern. What if he asked me to run the store with him? At the time, I was working as a financial consultant, advising individuals and corporate clients on insurance and investment strategies. I earned a solid income and loved my job. I was even studying for certification to advance my career when Lance proposed to me. I know you've been working hard to get that certification, he said. I want to support you in any way I can. I have enough staff at the store to manage on my own, so you should continue pursuing your dreams. His reassurance was the final push I needed to marry him. He seemed kind, supportive, and genuinely on my side, just the kind of person I wanted to build a life with. So, as agreed, he focused on his business, and I focused on my career. We both thought our marriage was going well. But about a year into our marriage, everything changed. I was spending my day off at home while Lance was at work. As I vacuumed under the bed, the vacuum caught on a pile of papers. We had only been living in this house for 6 months, so I was surprised to find such a mess. Curious, I picked up a crumpled piece of paper and opened it. The bold letters at the top of the page hit me like a ton of bricks. Reminder of payment. The total amount of debt owed in Lance's name was $200,000. $200,000. My head started spinning. Why had he hidden such a massive debt from me? I confronted him as soon as he came home. What is this debt? What's going on? It's not what you think, he said quickly. It's debt left to me by my parents. The debt wasn't personal. It was tied to his liquor store, passed down from his parents along with the business. It was secured by the land and the house we lived in, so he had no intention of renouncing the inheritance. I understood that it wasn't his personal debt, but it was still something that couldn't be ignored. But this is a payment reminder, I pointed out. Aren't you paying it off every month? I am, he replied, but sales fluctuate from month to month. Sometimes, during the slower months, I can't keep up with the payments. I have to pay my staff first, so I've asked the creditors to wait. That's when the letter came. At first, his explanation seemed reasonable, but delaying payments was clearly not a good idea, especially with a letter that included the words, "Final notice." I didn't tell you because I didn't want you to panic, he added quickly. But don't worry, the business is on track and we haven't been evicted from the house, right? That's true, but I looked at him with concern. Then he brought up something unexpected. If you're so worried, why don't you help me pay it off? You're making quite a bit, aren't you? I hesitated, uneasy with the direction the conversation was taking. This was his store, not mine. But then he added, we're husband and wife. We're supposed to help each other. My debt is your debt too. That's a bit sudden, I replied, taken aback. Are you okay with my store going out of business? He asked. A lot of people would suffer if it closed down, you know. He had a point. His store had become an essential part of the community. It was located in a suburban area with few other shops or supermarkets around. He sold fresh foods like meat and fish and even offered a home delivery service. I had visited the store several times, and it was always busy. Customers often mentioned how grateful they were to have it in the neighborhood. Please, honey, he pleaded. I'm focused on keeping the business running, but I need your help to pay off these debts. I respected his dedication to his work and the effort he put into the store. I didn't want to see it disappear. I didn't want that to happen at all. Being married means supporting each other through thick and thin, and if he was struggling, it seemed only natural for me to help him. Okay, I agreed. I'm repaying as much as I can every month from my salary, I assured him. You can focus on managing the store. I could help financially, but only he could run the business. I was glad that he relied on me above all else. But that was the beginning of a change in him. About 3 years passed since I took over his debt. He started coming home late more often. What were you doing so late? Drinking again? I asked. I just had a few drinks with some customers, he said casually. Did you make the payment this month? His tone was condescending, something I hadn't noticed before. I did, last week. Why? The store depends on you, so you'd better keep paying on time, he remarked. Whenever he got drunk, he began giving me orders. At first, I dismissed it as nonsense from a tipsy husband, but as it became a habit, it started to get under my skin. He made it seem as if it was normal for me to pay off his debt. By the way, Matt just had his 3rd kid, he added one day. I envy him. Matt, his friend from high school, also owned a business. His wife worked in the store alongside him. I've been wanting to talk to you about that, I said, finally voicing what I had been holding in. Don't you think it's time for us to start a family? His reaction was cold and dismissive. What? A baby? My business is just starting to pick up, and we're still in debt. How can we be so irresponsible? I held back my frustration. Matt has 3 children now, right? We can manage one too. His parents are still in good health, and his wife helps out at the store. They're different from us, he snapped, and I couldn't argue with that. But deep down, I had always thought I would have children. When I got married, my dream of starting a family was easily crushed. So, until I pay off all your debts, we can't have a baby? Well, I guess that's how it's going to be, he replied with a smirk. If you make a lot of money and pay off the debt quickly, I might think about it. His mean smile disgusted me, but I became determined to pay off the debts as soon as possible. How blind I was. Even though his demand was irrational, I was so fixated on the idea of starting a family that I didn't question it. From that point on, I worked tirelessly for Lance. I pursued additional qualifications, took promotional exams, and secured salary increases. I started earning much more than other women my age, even making advance payments on the debt. But the debt didn't disappear easily. Before I knew it, I turned 40, and I had to give up on having children. I told myself that as long as I still had my husband, it would be enough. He relied on me, and I was willing to do anything for him. As long as I believed that, I remained content. But Lance began coming home later and later as the days went by. Sometimes, he didn't come back until morning. I was working late at the store, and before I knew it, the sun was up, he would say. I convinced myself that he was working hard to protect the store, and that I needed to do my best as his wife too. We were in this together, striving for a better future. The months and years passed, and finally, the day arrived when I would make the last payment. I had sacrificed all sorts of luxuries for the sake of the debt, but now, I wouldn't have to anymore. I could finally spend my hard-earned money the way I wanted. As I reflected on everything, I realized just how much had changed since I got married. I had been so focused on money that we had never taken a vacation or even dined at a nice restaurant. Now that we were in our 50s, I hoped we could finally start enjoying those things. On the day the last payment was due, I took the day off. I cooked a more luxurious dinner than usual, prepared a bottle of wine, and even baked Lance's favorite chocolate cake. I wanted to celebrate our new debt-free life together. When he came home from work, I set everything on the table and said, "Finally, it's over. It feels like it's been a long time, but the last 20 years have gone by so fast, haven't they?" Lance was trembling, his head hung low. I wondered if he was overwhelmed with happiness. But as I stood there, stunned, he started laughing, an eerie, unfamiliar sound that sent a chill down my spine. "What the hell is going on? Are you okay?" I asked, bewildered. Then the man I thought was my husband said something outrageous. "You're dismissed now. I'm grateful to you for the past 20 years. Thanks to you paying off all my debt, I'm finally free. Great job. I don't need you anymore." "What are you talking about?" I asked, completely at a loss. With a smug expression, he pulled something out of his bag. "This is my last present to you." In bold letters, "Petition for divorce" stared back at me, stabbing at my heart. He continued, proudly, "I've decided to marry someone else, so you're no longer of any use to me. Thanks for being my cash dispenser until now." "You're getting remarried? Have you been cheating on me all this time?" I asked, the realization hitting me like a ton of bricks. I thought back to all the late nights, the excuses about work or socializing. While I was working hard to pay off his debt, he was. He kept that smug look on his face. "I've already found my next potential wife. I want to divorce you and marry her. That's why I've been waiting for you to clear my debt." Tears welled up in my eyes as the reality of his betrayal sank in. As I stared at the feast I had carefully prepared, the sight became a blur through my tears, adding to my sadness. He shoved the divorce papers at me and barked, "Get the hell out of here." My blood boiled, anger replacing the sadness and despair I had been feeling. "Fine, but you'll regret it," I managed to say. "Regret it? Why would I regret divorcing an old hag like you?" He sneered. Old hag? If I was an old hag, then he was an old fool. Did he really think he was still young? The absurdity of his delusion made me regain my composure. Without another word, I took the divorce papers from him. "I'm going to hold on to this for now. You'll hear from me soon," I said, packing my belongings and leaving the house. 20 years of marriage ended so easily. Once I was alone, the tears finally came, tears of emptiness and frustration. The next day, I contacted my attorney, had him draft a divorce agreement, and requested a full background report on his so-called bride-to-be. Not long after, I received a call from Lance. "Jessica, what the hell is this document?" he shouted, his voice furious. I could practically see his face turning bright red through the phone. I remained calm, in stark contrast to his rage. "That's the divorce agreement. What's the problem?" "I know what it is. I'm talking about this loan agreement. Why do I have to pay you back?" He sounded desperate, his voice rising with each word. "This is insane. It's not right." He was referring to the clause about repaying the money I had spent on his behalf during our marriage. "You decided to help out of your own goodwill. Why are you digging up the past now?" His frantic protests only confirmed what I had known all along. He never thought I'd stand up for myself. But now, I was done being used. "What do you mean?" he stammered. "You did it as my wife." "That was then," I replied coldly. "But once we divorce, it's a different story." The regret I had hinted at earlier suddenly dawned on him. He had never considered that I might demand repayment. The moment he asked for a divorce, I had immediately thought about making him pay back every cent I'd spent on his behalf. Given my work in insurance and investments, I often dealt with clients facing divorce or inheritance issues. Thanks to that, I had the contacts of several experienced attorneys whom I consulted right away. The total amount, including interest, came to just over $300,000. I was determined to have him pay back every penny. That was all I wanted. Seeing my unwavering stance and the name of a well-known local attorney on the documents, he must have realized how serious this was. He had thought he could get rid of me without paying alimony, a laughable idea. "You know I don't have much money," he muttered. "Then why don't you sell the store to fund it?" I suggested. "If I do that, I'll have nothing left." "You're 55, right? You could still find another job if you wanted to." "Give me a break," he grumbled, his voice filled with desperation. Our conversation was going nowhere, and I was tempted to hang up. But there was one last thing I wanted to ask. "By the way, how's it going with your new bride-to-be?" "That's none of your business," he snapped. I burst out laughing at his brusque attitude. "Sounds like you're really going through it. Good luck with that," I said, ready to hang up. "Wait," he blurted out. "I've decided not to marry her. We can start over." For some reason, he was pleading with me now. I shot back my final words before slamming the phone down. "Start over. Don't kid yourself. I don't want you." I couldn't believe I had spent 20 years married to this man. I wondered if others saw me as more ridiculous than him. Until the divorce, I had genuinely respected him, watching him work tirelessly for the store and his customers. I wanted to support him. But 20 years later, I realized he was just a fool. His talk of remarriage was nothing but a self-indulgent fantasy. It all started when he innocently flirted with a teenage university student who worked part-time. "You're so cute, Melissa. Will you be my wife?" he'd asked. She played along, jokingly replying, "Well, I might think about it if you let me be a full-time housewife." The truth was, he thought she was serious. To her, the idea of marrying a man nearly 40 years her senior was nothing more than a joke. When he persistently pressed her to marry him, she was horrified. Her parents had to intervene and place a restraining order against him. When I read the report from the private investigator, I laughed so hard I nearly hyperventilated. All those late nights he came home, I thought he was working hard. I had no idea. Instead, he was hitting on young girls at his favorite bars and strip joints, making a fool of himself by saying things like, "I'm surprisingly popular with young girls. I'm a salesman, so I have this easygoing aura. They say I look younger. Don't you think so?" The girls apparently cringed at his comments. He no longer saw any value in his old wife and viewed me only as a cash dispenser. But his delusions were laughable. No one took him seriously, and he ended up as a sad, almost stalker-like figure who nearly got into trouble with the police. Honestly, it might have been easier if he had just cheated on me, but he couldn't even manage to find a mistress. His obsession with marrying a young girl stemmed from the fact that his friend Matt had a grandchild. Matt had told me the story himself. As soon as he saw my grandchild, he said he wanted to have a child of his own. I scolded him, telling him he had no right to speak that way, especially after I had spent years paying off his debt. I was harsh, but I had no idea he had stooped so low. He was absolutely mortified. "I'm glad I didn't waste my golden years with that man," I muttered to myself. My divorce was finalized, and since the division of our property wasn't clear-cut, he had some room to negotiate for his own benefit. However, he quickly gave up just because my attorney was well known. I couldn't believe how such a gutless person had managed to stay in business all that time. In the end, he sold the store to pay me back. Thankfully, his employees had already left before he sold it, so they weren't affected by his misfortune. Many customers were shocked and frowned upon him for giving up the business his parents had passed down to him. When they learned the reason was to pay off his ex-wife, the news spread like wildfire, and it almost sounded like a comedy. Even if he hadn't sold the store, the bad publicity would have eventually ruined his business. In a way, it was probably for the best that he sold it before he went bankrupt. The money from the sale wasn't enough to cover his debt, so he continues to work part-time jobs to pay me back to this day. Occasionally, I still get messages from him. It was all my fault. Can we get back together? I was out of my mind because Matt was showing off his grandkid. Even after I blocked his number, he kept calling from different phones. Eventually, I had my attorney warn him that if he continued contacting me, we'd file a restraining order. The calls finally stopped. As usual, he's terrified of the attorney. By the way, guess what I do for work now? I'm a marriage counselor. Just as I turned 50 and felt the need for a change, a friend of mine opened a matchmaking business. I quit my previous job and joined her. Now, I help singles find their match and provide advice on financial issues between couples, including how to manage insurance and other matters. It's been a hit, and our membership has grown quickly. Couples who want to have honest and thorough discussions from the start appreciate our unique service. Having gone through so much myself, I don't want others to make the same mistakes I did. Although my salary is a little lower than before, I genuinely enjoy helping others find happiness every day. I found my happiness after letting go of my ex-husband, and now I'm doing my best to be a bridge to someone else's happiness. My name is Erica, and I'm 39 years old. My husband Mark is 6 years my senior, and we've been married for over 15 years. This year, our daughter started high school, which marks a new chapter in our lives. After settling down to raise our child, I started a handmade business. It's been thriving, and I'm increasingly busy with orders. While things seem to be going well professionally, my married life has been a different story. Mark and I met at work, where he was my trainer. His maturity and the 6-year age difference initially attracted me. We started dating, and not long after, I discovered I was pregnant. The unexpected news led us to marry quickly. Due to severe morning sickness and Mark's request, I resigned from my job and became a housewife. As soon as I left work, I was expected to handle chores at my mother-in-law's house, which was just a 5-minute walk from ours. Despite my struggles with morning sickness, I was pressured to help out, as my mother-in-law insisted it was my duty as a wife. My husband and mother-in-law frequently reminded me that, as a wife, I was obligated to handle household tasks and follow my mother-in-law's directives. This constant pressure made me start believing that I had no choice but to comply. Living with a growing child and having quit my job made it hard for me to rely on my own parents for support. Divorce was never a consideration at the time. Fortunately, Mark was kind to our daughter, Nancy, and I managed to endure the situation. However, things changed when Mark's brother married and had a baby boy. My mother-in-law's attitude shifted, and she became critical of Nancy, often lamenting about the lack of a male heir. Mark, worried about his mother's views, began to distance himself from Nancy, who he had once cherished deeply. Mark's family is not involved in business and lives off their vegetable garden and a large backyard. They had land generations ago but gave it up long ago. I couldn't understand why there was such a fixation on heirs, especially with outdated notions about the eldest son and heir. To protect Nancy from hearing these hurtful words, I tried to limit our visits to Mark's parents. During my pregnancy, they called frequently, but after Nancy was born, I often refused their visits. I wanted to focus on my daughter and distance myself from my in-laws' selfish expectations. When I finally reached the end of my patience, I made a decisive change. As soon as my daughter turned 2, I returned to work, despite my husband and mother-in-law's displeasure. Anticipating their resistance, I kept my decision to myself until I had secured a job and enrolled my daughter in daycare. During this time, a friend suggested I try making handmade goods, and what started as a hobby quickly evolved into a passion. I began creating and selling my work, and it gained momentum after a friend admired a piece and wanted to purchase it. Her praise encouraged me, and soon her friends followed suit, spreading the word about my creations. As demand increased, I decided to sell my items online. The orders kept pouring in, and what began as a side job soon became my full-time career as a professional artist. Despite my success, I continued to distance myself from my in-laws. Visits during holidays like Thanksgiving and Christmas were inevitable, though. As my daughter grew older, my mother-in-law began to impose household chores on her, insisting, "She's a girl. It's expected." It was infuriating, but my daughter's calm demeanor helped me keep my composure. Although these visits were infrequent, they were painful to endure. I felt heartbroken watching my daughter quietly do her chores, feeling pity and sadness as I witnessed her comply with my mother-in-law's demands. Meanwhile, my husband enjoyed his time socializing with relatives and siblings, seemingly unaffected by the discomfort I felt. I felt even more miserable as I walked into the house. "Hi there, you must be hungry. I'll make dinner soon," I greeted my daughter when she came home from school. But she seemed different. Her usual cheerfulness was replaced with a sullen expression. She called out to me, but her eyes were distant and troubled. Concerned, I rushed over. "What's wrong? Did something happen at school?" I asked, but she only shook her head silently. My daughter had always been calm, never shedding a tear since starting middle school. I waited patiently, hoping she would open up. Finally, she spoke, her voice trembling. "Dad? What about him?" I prompted, sensing something was deeply troubling her. Her eyes filled with tears. "He was hugging a woman," she said, a tear escaping down her cheek. More followed, and soon her face was streaked with tears. Over time, my husband and I had grown distant, though we remained united for our daughter's sake. Despite our strained relationship, I had hoped he would stay faithful, and I accepted his lack of involvement in housework and childcare. I never blamed him for that. I was determined to avoid raising our daughter in a single-parent household, so I convinced myself that our situation was tolerable. We might not smile together, but as a family of three, we could still find moments of laughter. Now, though, my husband's betrayal was clear. My daughter's tears were a painful reminder of the love and trust that had been eroded, and I felt a deep sadness in seeing her cry about something so heart-wrenching. I felt my eyes burn with anger as I looked at my daughter. "Mom, I'm sorry," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "Why are you apologizing, Nancy?" I asked, though I could see the pain in her eyes. She remained silent, her gaze fixed on the floor. Seeing her distress only deepened my own. I felt like I was failing her as a mother. "I'm sorry, Nancy. I'm just such a weak mother. If I hadn't seen it." "No, Nancy, you didn't do anything wrong," I reassured her, though my heart was heavy. Her uniform was damp with tears, and her face was trembling as she clenched her fists. My own tears, which I had tried so hard to hold back, began to fall. "I can't forgive him," I said softly, my resolve strengthening. "Honey, can we talk for a minute?" I asked my husband when he came home. "I'm tired," he replied curtly, barely glancing at me. His cold tone would usually have silenced me, but today was different. "I have something important to tell you," I said, struggling to stay calm. He clicked his tongue in annoyance and sat down across from me at the dining table. "What's it about? What have you been up to today?" "Of course, I was working," I answered, though his dismissive attitude only fueled my frustration. Without warning, he slammed his hand on the table, yelling, "What are you asking me?" I took a deep breath and continued, "I saw you hugging a woman." I didn't mention that Nancy had seen it too. My husband's reaction was immediate and harsh. "So what?" he snapped, looking at me with a scowl. "What about it?" "Are you cheating on me?" I asked, my voice trembling. He laughed derisively. "What else could it be?" His mockery left me speechless, my mind reeling from his offensive demeanor. As he noticed my reaction, he looked at me with an expression that mixed disdain and curiosity. "What's wrong with that?" he asked, his tone dripping with contempt. "What do you have to complain about?" "It's an affair," I said, struggling to keep my voice steady. "You don't even care about our relationship." His response was chilling, as if it were all just a matter of fact. "We got married because you were pregnant. We stayed together out of obligation. What more do you want from me?" His words cut deep. "I've been here all this time, supporting you," he continued, his laughter bitter and victorious. When he noticed the divorce papers I had prepared, he grabbed them from me. "Divorce papers? What's this? You thought showing me these would make me listen? Nonsense. If you want it so badly, I'll sign them for you," he said with a sneer. He filled out the papers with exaggerated motions and threw them at me. How can you even think of divorcing me? I've been taking care of you while you're not even working. You quit your job just because you had a baby. You're nothing." His harsh words echoed in my mind as I looked at the divorce papers on the floor. "You should be grateful I'm not the one asking for the divorce," he continued. "If you don't want it, don't say anything." With that, he took out his phone and began dialing. His sweet, false voice made it clear he was calling his girlfriend. I knew I couldn't confront him about it, so I stayed silent. About a month later, it was time for our annual Christmas visit to my in-laws. My husband was eager to go, bustling around to get ready. "Hey," I said, trying to catch his attention. "I need to talk to you." "Not now. We're running late," he replied dismissively. "You can talk to me at my parents' house." He hurriedly bundled me and our daughter into the car, his excitement palpable. As usual, he was the only one chatting cheerfully, while I felt the weight of our unresolved issues and his lack of respect. "Welcome home," he said as we arrived, but his words felt hollow and meaningless to me. When we arrived, my mother-in-law greeted us with a forced smile and ushered us into the living room. We exchanged pleasantries with the relatives who had arrived before us. "Oh my God, it's so nice to see you after such a long time," my mother-in-law said with exaggerated cheerfulness. Her emphasis on long time hinted at her displeasure over my recent absence. I knew she resented that I hadn't been visiting as often. "As my daughter-in-law, you need to help with the chores," she always said whenever I came over, though she never asked the same of my brother-in-law's wife. But then again, they lived far away and rarely visited. My mother-in-law directed me to the kitchen. I didn't mind helping at first, but when she also urged my daughter, Nancy, to join, I felt a pang of frustration. "No, I began, but my mother-in-law cut me off. "She's a girl, she should be able to do this," she said, her tone dismissive. At that moment, something inside me snapped. I turned to my husband, who was preparing drinks. "Honey, we need to talk." "What is it now?" he responded, irritation evident on his face. "This can't wait. It has to be now," I insisted, ignoring his annoyed expression. "Erica, let's handle this later," he said, clearly wanting to avoid the confrontation. "Let's focus on the party for now." But my mother-in-law interrupted again, concerned about how her relatives would perceive her. "You're my daughter-in-law. I have plenty of work for you," she said, trying to divert attention from the issue at hand. After scanning the room and seeing the curious glances of her guests, she muttered, "On Christmas Day, I'll make sure she and her daughter handle everything." Taking a deep breath, I stood up, holding my daughter's hand firmly. "I'm done with this. I'm getting a divorce." "What? What are you talking about?" My husband and mother-in-law gasped in shock, their faces a mix of confusion and disbelief. I tried to ignore the chaos and focus on leaving with my daughter, but they blocked our way. "What do you mean by divorce?" my mother-in-law demanded, her voice rising in disbelief. She glared at both me and my husband, who was clearly caught off guard. It was evident he hadn't been expecting this revelation. "I mean exactly what I said. I'm divorcing this man," I replied firmly. "What? I didn't hear anything about this," my husband stammered. "What's going on?" "You told me to go ahead and file the papers if I wanted a divorce." "Well, I've done just that," I said, my tone unwavering. My husband was left speechless, clearly unable to process the situation. His optimism had clearly blinded him to the reality of our marriage. "You weren't serious about this, were you?" he finally managed to ask. "Of course I was serious," I replied. "Thank you for the papers. I've already submitted them. And as for why I'm telling you here, look around. This is exactly why. You've avoided any real conversation about this, and now we're facing it." My husband's face turned red as he realized the full extent of the public humiliation he was enduring. He had avoided discussing our issues, and now the consequences were unavoidable. But my mother-in-law wasn't done. "What's this about? I can't believe you're divorcing my son. You must have done something wrong, Erica." I looked at her incredulous. "How can you be so sure I'm at fault? Your son is trembling, and you still think it's all my fault?" My husband was clearly at a loss for words, flustered by the unexpected revelations. My mother-in-law, still in shock, demanded, "How am I going to explain this to others?" I turned to Nancy, who had been watching the scene unfold. "Nancy, why don't you tell them what you saw?" Nancy's cold gaze cut through the tension as she spoke. "Even though Dad is cheating on Mom." "What?" My mother-in-law froze, unable to process the new information. My husband, stunned, could only look at Nancy in disbelief. Why? Nancy asked, her voice trembling. I saw you hugging another woman. What? My husband stammered, clearly caught off guard. It's okay, Nancy, I said gently, though I could see the disgust in her eyes. She no longer wanted anything to do with her father, and it broke my heart a little. I wondered if I should have kept her from coming today, even though she'd insisted on it. Are we done here? I asked, ready to leave. This is false accusation, my husband suddenly blurted. You have no proof. I'm not divorcing you. His defiance caught me off guard. How can you say that? You've always claimed you never loved me. Is this about maintaining appearances? You don't have any proof, he shouted, stuttering as he tried to defend himself. I calmly reached into my bag and pulled out several photos, scattering them across the floor. Here's your proof, I said. The photos showed him walking hand in hand with a young woman. The evidence was undeniable, and he could no longer deny his actions in front of his extended family. His face turned red as he scrambled to gather the pictures. Why did you? He began, but his voice trailed off. I think you've gone too far, I replied. I never condoned cheating. I had hired a private detective to investigate my husband's behavior. The detective not only followed him but also recorded his conversations with the woman who had spoken freely about my husband's behavior and even made derogatory remarks about me. How did you know that? My husband asked, his face paling. The relatives surrounding us looked on in shock, and my mother-in-law's face was one of disbelief. Mary, I'm not your son anymore, my husband said. Even if I was married to your son, I had no obligation to take care of this house, I said firmly. I'm done. From now on, please contact my lawyer. With that, Nancy and I left. I had already filed for divorce and was pursuing alimony. Although my ex-husband initially resisted, the hard evidence I presented made him concede. I also filed a claim against the woman he was involved with, and she agreed to compensate me. The scandal spread among their relatives and neighbors, causing them considerable embarrassment. My daughter and I embarked on a new chapter, free from the ties that once bound us. As a handmade artist, my business thrived with an influx of online orders. My daughter informed me that our story had even made its way onto social media. I'm finally free from the constraints of my past. Despite the hardships, I now have the opportunity to do what I want, take care of my daughter, and fully enjoy my life. Get out of this house, she demanded, her voice cold and unwavering. I barely had time to react before she added, besides, I already have a plan for a new life for him. My mother-in-law, never one to change, had concocted an outrageous scheme. With a triumphant smirk, she said, You incompetent wife, get your divorce. Something snapped inside me. You'll regret saying that, I retorted. Regret? Why should I? She laughed dismissively. Ha ha. Because this house, I said, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. My name is Kelly, and I'm 34 years old. After graduating from college, I landed a job as an engineer at a major company. Since then, I've poured my heart into my work. It was during this period that I met Tommy, who would eventually become my husband. When I was 28, I encountered him through work. He was a salesman who frequently visited our office. Tommy was always friendly, greeting me with a warm smile even though our paths rarely crossed directly. It was at a company social event that we truly connected. The person in charge of our account had a high regard for Tommy and after a brief introduction, extended an invitation for him to join us. That evening, Tommy and I discovered we had much in common. We exchanged contact details and soon began dating. 2 years later, we married. Our relationship has been a source of immense joy and support. Tommy has been my rock, especially when I face significant decisions like starting my own business. When I was contemplating leaving my job to freelance, I was filled with doubt. The uncertainties about steady income and potential vacations weighed heavily on me. But Tommy encouraged me, saying, If you really want to do this, then go ahead and try. I'll support you no matter what. Despite my cautious nature, I took the plunge and resigned from my job. To my surprise, my freelance work took off beyond my expectations. My prior experience made me a trusted professional, and I began handling significant projects with a much higher income than before. Tommy and I were thrilled with the growth in our savings. While I was ecstatic about the financial success, what truly made me happy was his unwavering support. With him by my side, I felt I could tackle any challenge. These days, we enjoy traveling and driving together on his days off. We still save diligently, but also allow ourselves the occasional splurge. Our life together is fulfilling and joyful. Then, one day, while working from home, I started feeling unwell. When the discomfort persisted, I went to the hospital for a checkup. To my astonishment, I discovered I was pregnant. That evening, as I waited anxiously for Tommy to come home, I could hardly contain my excitement. When he arrived, I immediately shared the news. "I went to the hospital today," I said, a mix of nervousness and excitement in my voice. "Oh, I see," he replied, his tone unexpectedly subdued. "I'm sorry. I couldn't follow you there. How did it go?" my husband asked as he hung up his suit jacket. I chuckled softly and replied, "They told me I'm pregnant." He paused, staring at me in surprise. "What? Seriously?" "Yes," I confirmed, beaming. "I'm pregnant." A wide smile spread across his face. "Really? We did it. Thank you, Kelly." His joy was infectious, and I couldn't help but share in his excitement. We eagerly anticipated welcoming our baby together, committed to doing our best as a family. As we sat down to enjoy the dinner I had prepared, my husband continued to talk animatedly about our future child. We discussed the baby's potential gender and began dreaming about baby items. "If it's a boy," he said, "I want to teach him to play catch. And if it's a girl, I'd love to play house with her." I decided it was the right moment to share a thought that had been on my mind. "How about we build a house soon?" He looked puzzled. "What do you mean?" "Well," I explained, "we've saved up quite a bit of money. With a baby in the way, our current place might be too small. It could be a good time to invest in a new home. We could have a bigger space for the baby to play, a dedicated room for my work. Doesn't that sound dreamy?" He nodded, clearly pleased with the idea. "Yes, it does. We'll have a beautiful, spacious home for our new baby." We decided to start planning our new house immediately. On weekends, we visited open houses and worked on floor plans, aiming to complete the house before the baby arrived. About a month after learning about the pregnancy, we planned a visit to my in-laws to share the news. I felt a pang of unease. My relationship with my mother-in-law had always been strained. The drive to their house was about 30 minutes, but I seldom visited. During our early marriage, I'd made an effort to visit for Thanksgiving and New Year's. However, my mother-in-law frequently criticized my career, saying things like, "You're too focused on your job," and "When are you going to give us grandchildren?" Her comments were often harsh. "All you do is sit at your computer, don't you? I don't like you because you're kind of a nerd. Tommy's a great communicator as a salesman, but his wife is like this." Despite my efforts, she failed to understand that my interest in computers was the reason behind my job. While I didn't have poor communication skills, her words stung. She only masked her true feelings when my husband and father-in-law were around, putting on a facade of politeness. Her heartless remarks, made only in private, left me bitter and wary. Gradually, I had been avoiding my mother-in-law, visiting her less frequently. However, this time, I had no choice but to go since we were sharing the news of our baby's arrival. She had often asked if I had any children yet, so I hoped she would be pleased to hear the news. With a mix of anxiety and anticipation, my husband drove me to my in-law's house. My mother-in-law greeted me with her usual blank expression, but her demeanor shifted immediately when my husband spoke. "Mom, it's been a long time," he said warmly. Her face lit up with a smile, and her tone brightened. "Oh, Kelly, it's been ages. I hope you've been well." "Yes, I've been fine," I replied, trying to match her cheerful tone. "I'm glad to hear you're doing well, too. Come on in, both of you," she invited us with a forced enthusiasm. As we entered the living room, my father-in-law welcomed us warmly, saying, "Oh, you've come a long way." I was about to sit on the sofa with my husband to chat with my father-in-law when my mother-in-law asked me to help with serving tea. I followed her to the kitchen, feeling a pang of discomfort. In the kitchen, my mother-in-law's demeanor changed completely. She looked at me coldly and said, "I haven't seen your irritating face in a while. I suppose you're still doing that lowly job of yours? I hear you plan to keep working even after the baby is born. I hope you're not going to make a foolish decision like that." Her harsh words stung, but I had to endure them. When I returned to the living room to serve tea, her attitude shifted again. In front of my husband and father-in-law, she was all smiles and acted like the perfect mother-in-law. When my husband announced my pregnancy, her reaction was a facade of joy. "I'm so happy, Kelly. Thank you. I can't wait to meet my grandchild. You're such a wonderful daughter-in-law." Her sudden change in attitude was bewildering, but I forced a smile in response. I was eager to leave after sharing the news. I just needed to navigate the conversation with polite responses and get out of there. Unexpectedly, something happened during the conversation that caught me off guard. It all began with a seemingly casual comment from my father-in-law. "Won't your current room feel a bit cramped once the baby arrives?" My husband, excited about the prospect of a new house, enthusiastically mentioned that we were considering building one. My mother-in-law, who had been quiet until then, perked up immediately. "You're building a house?" she asked, her tone oddly cheerful. I had a sinking feeling about where this was heading. Then my mother-in-law made a surprising suggestion. "Let's make it a two-family house." My husband and I were caught off guard. "What are you talking about, Mother?" he asked, his confusion evident. But my mother-in-law continued as if she hadn't noticed our reaction. "Since this house is getting old anyway, we've been talking about either renovating it or selling it. If we convert it into a two-family house, we could support Kelly during her pregnancy and live with our grandchildren. Don't you think?" My father-in-law, still puzzled, responded, "Well, it would be nice to live with the grandchildren, wouldn't it?" My mother-in-law, as if she had prepared a convincing argument, added, "Exactly. It's not easy when you have a baby, especially since you plan to keep working after the baby is born, Kelly. It would be reassuring if I were around to help with the housework and childcare." Her pressure was palpable, and I could feel myself flinch. My husband, sensing my discomfort, said, "Well, it's an important decision, so we'll need to think about it. We should be heading home now that we've shared the news," he added, signaling it was time for us to leave. I was surprised by how excited my mother-in-law was about the news, but it was a relief to see her happy about the birth of our child. Despite her enthusiasm, I still felt apprehensive about living together. My past experiences with her left me doubtful. However, since then, my mother-in-law seemed to have changed her approach. She stopped the harsh comments and began regularly sending me emails to check on my health. Her texts were kind and considerate, without any of the unnecessary remarks I had grown accustomed to. I started to wonder if she had genuinely changed her attitude. After a long absence, I visited my in-laws for Thanksgiving, and their warmth was unexpected. Even when we were alone, she was kind and supportive. Newfound kindness made me reconsider my stance. When my husband asked me about the possibility of living together in the new house, I was more open to the idea. The deadline for completing the house was approaching quickly, and we needed to make a decision. I had been working closely with my mother-in-law, who had been increasingly kind. It began to feel like living in the same house might be manageable, especially with her help around the house and with childcare. I even started to think it would be beneficial to have her support. "Let's go ahead and build the two-family house," I suggested to my husband. He looked surprised. "Is that really a good idea? You've always had issues with my mom." I sensed he was carefully observing my reaction. While I still had reservations about her, I was reassured by how she had been treating me recently. "I think we could make it work now. She's been very kind, and it seems like we can get along." My husband seemed relieved. "I'm glad you feel that way. You're right, my mother can be a bit challenging, but I believe she'll help with the kids." We returned to the construction company to modify our plans for the two-family house. Since we had already settled on the floor plans, we expanded the rooms to accommodate the new arrangement. The process went smoothly, and we even visited the construction site with my in-laws. I was looking forward to the lively, new chapter with the arrival of our child. I was thrilled as we prepared to move into our new home. Construction was underway, and I was nearing the last trimester of my pregnancy. The excitement of starting this new chapter in our lives was palpable, and my in-laws seemed genuinely supportive. A few months later, I successfully gave birth to a healthy baby girl. My husband and in-laws were overjoyed. As we awaited the completion of our new house, anticipation grew. Finally, the house was ready. My husband and I brought our daughter to our new home for the first time. Coincidentally, my in-laws arrived at the same time, and together we entered the house with eager excitement. The new home was stunning, spacious, and beautifully designed. Just walking through it filled me with joy. Both my husband and father-in-law quickly settled into their new rooms, their faces beaming with contentment. Then, I was called to the kitchen by my mother-in-law. "Come here for a minute, Kelly," she said. I was surprised to find her at our house, but I went to the kitchen as requested. "What's wrong, Gemma?" I asked, puzzled. "I can finally tell you," she said coldly. I want you to leave this house." I was taken aback, unable to grasp what was happening. My mother-in-law continued with a disdainful tone reminiscent of the past. "I didn't want to be kind to you, but I tolerated you because Tommy was building me a house. It's been tough these past 6 months, but now my efforts have paid off." "What do you mean?" I managed to ask, my voice trembling. "I've never liked you. You kept your job even after having a child, and to top it off, it's a girl. You promised to help with the housework and childcare, but that was a lie to manipulate Tommy into doing what I wanted. Now that the house is built, you're no longer needed. Divorce Tommy." My heart sank as she added, "And I already have a new wife in mind for him." "What?" I gasped, shocked. "She's the daughter of an acquaintance of mine. She wants to be a housewife, so I plan to arrange for her to marry Tommy in his house." I was stunned into silence. My mother-in-law's cruel plans were far from what I had expected. Her face was a mask of triumph as she declared, "You incompetent wife, get a divorce and leave right now." At that moment, something inside me snapped. There would be no forgiveness for her cruelty. "You'll regret saying that," I said, my voice shaking. "Regret? Why?" she asked with a mocking tone. "Because this house," I began, but before I could finish, my husband arrived. "Hey Mom, I heard what you just said. What do you mean you're kicking Kelly out and planning to replace her?" he demanded. My mother-in-law looked momentarily startled by his interruption but quickly resumed her stance. "I'm only doing this for your own good," she said dismissively. My husband's face was a mix of anger and confusion as he stood up to his mother. The tension was palpable, and I knew that the future of our family was hanging in the balance. "I don't want this weak woman living in your house. Get a new wife who is young and can give birth to a son," my mother-in-law said with cold disdain. My husband's face turned pale as he confronted her. "What are you talking about? Kelly is the one who built this house. It's in her name." My mother-in-law's eyes widened in disbelief. "That's a lie." "No, it's not," my husband said firmly, his disgust evident. "I've explained this before. Kelly's income increased significantly when she became a freelancer. She makes enough to buy a house." "What are you talking about?" my mother-in-law asked, confused. "Kelly earns about 10 times more than I do," my husband continued, his voice rising. "She makes about $3 million a month." My mother-in-law's jaw dropped. Clearly, she had no idea about my earnings and was taken aback by the revelation. Just then, my father-in-law arrived, looking for us. "I was wondering where you went and thought you might be here." "What's going on?" he asked, noticing the tension. My husband told my father-in-law everything my mother-in-law had said, his face reddened with anger. "So you've been treating Kelly like this? You've been bullying her? That's unacceptable." My mother-in-law was visibly shaken by his reaction. "Kelly, please be honest with me. Has my wife been mistreating you?" I told my father-in-law everything honestly. How my mother-in-law had been difficult from the start of our marriage and only pretended to be kind during the house construction. His disappointment was clear as he glared at her. "I'm already disappointed in you. I'm divorcing you." "What?" my mother-in-law stammered. "I don't want to be with someone who can't care for the person important to her son," he declared. "If I'm going to retire, I want to be with someone who genuinely cares. I will not be miserable in my old age. You're the one leaving. I'm divorcing you now." My mother-in-law was devastated and began to cry, unable to stand, but no one sided with her. My husband helped her into my father-in-law's car, and my father-in-law apologized to me before returning to their house. It turned out their house was already on the market, and he had expedited the move-out date to prepare for the worst. He served my mother-in-law with divorce papers and moved into our new duplex. At first, Dean was hesitant to live with us, but given our positive impression of him, we invited him to stay. Meanwhile, my mother-in-law, left with no job and no support, moved into a cheap, shabby apartment. The marriage arrangement she had hoped for her acquaintance's daughter and my husband was also canceled. Her untrustworthiness and attempts to meddle had left her isolated, and she quickly lost all her connections. Though I'm not sure what she has done since, I imagine her life is now quite difficult. On the other hand, our family of 4 is thriving. My father-in-law and husband dote on our daughter, and happiness fills our home each day. We look forward to continuing our lives together, supporting each other and enjoying our newfound peace.
Hello, I'm Kathleen, and I carry a vivid memory from a few months back that I feel compelled to share. It's a story about recognizing toxic behavior and the importance of standing up against it. I'm 31, and my immediate family includes my 34-year-old husband, Anthony, and our kitten. Anthony and I, high school sweethearts, tied the knot at a young age despite attending colleges in different states. Our bond remains strong, and next month we'll celebrate our 13th year together. Regrettably, my mother in law, Carol, won't be joining us. From the start, Carol harbored a dislike for me. With two sons, she had always indulged and spoiled them, considering no one worthy of her precious boys. Anthony and his older brother, David, were oblivious to her controlling and manipulative nature. As they grew, Carol's overbearing tendencies became problematic, forbidding her teenage sons from dating or socializing with girls outside of school. Despite evident signs, Anthony and David remained enamored with their mother's love, failing to recognize her control. Over time, David began rebelling against Carol's rules, which led to conflicts, even threats against his then-girlfriend, Lauren, now his wife. David, however, stood firm, refusing to succumb to Carol's influence. Gradually, both brothers distanced themselves from Carol. Anthony, while acknowledging his brother's actions, believed they were excessive. In the early stages of our relationship, I refrained from commenting to avoid conflicts. Little did I know that Carol would redirect her efforts toward me, employing every means possible to dismantle our relationship. She orchestrated an elaborate Venice tour during prom week to prevent us from attending together. Despite Anthony's pleas to cancel the trip, it was the only time he went against his mother's wishes. Each time Carol called me, unleashing her barrage of insults and deeming me unworthy. Anthony remained passive, offering no defense. Carol even went so far as to predict that I would be unfaithful when I headed off to college. As we both secured spots in different colleges across states, Anthony succumbed to the pressure, leading us to take a brief break. During this hiatus, Carol took advantage of the situation, celebrating our apparent breakup. Unexpectedly, Anthony reconciled with me, infuriating Carol. In response, she intensified her harassment and humiliation, seizing every opportunity to make my life miserable. In an attempt to address the issue, I approached Anthony, expressing my grievances. Anthony, your mother is consistently disrespectful towards me. Despite my efforts to be friendly and welcoming, she berates me and hurls insults. I'm growing weary of her behavior, and you need to address it. Anthony responded dismissively, defending his mother. Kathleen, you know my mother is a bit sensitive after what happened with David. She fears losing me as well and genuinely believes she's looking out for my future. Don't take her words to heart. Infuriated, I pressed further. So you're okay with how Carol treats me? Remember, she tried to break us up. Anthony justified Carol's actions, claiming she was trying to prevent potential heartbreak, leaving me frustrated. I confronted him about it. She played on your insecurities to end our relationship. How can you justify that despite my efforts to make him see my perspective? Anthony remained unconvinced. He insisted that Carol could do no wrong and accused me of falsely accusing her. Even David, attempting to reason with Anthony, faced resistance. Anthony accused David of betraying their mother, creating an awkward and strained dynamic between the two brothers. David ultimately married Amy, his high school sweetheart, the same person Carol had tried to scare off. Although David invited me to the wedding, he deliberately omitted to inform Carol, leading to her emotional distress. Carol desperately attempted to persuade Anthony to intervene and secure an invitation for her. Anthony, known for being a mama's boy, engaged in a heated argument with David about Carol. Initially reluctant to attend the wedding to support Carol, Anthony faced my challenge, questioning whether boycotting the event was justified given Carol's history with David and Amy. I pointed out Carol's persistent complaints about Amy supposedly taking David away from her during high school, attempting to defuse the situation. I asserted that it was a misunderstanding, acknowledging that mothers can sometimes become overly involved. I emphasized the importance of family, urging everyone to mend bridges and refrain from holding grudges. I reminded Anthony that the decision of whom to invite to the wedding rested with David and Amy. I emphasized the need to respect their autonomy, discouraging any requests. Despite my inability to attend the wedding, I expressed my concern that they might be making a mistake. Planning to RSVP the following day in the hope of influencing their decision, highlighting the potential consequences. I warned Anthony that not attending the wedding might result in being cut off by David and Amy, just as they had done with Carol. After much deliberation, Anthony eventually agreed to attend the wedding. I felt optimistic that this decision might bring positive change, allowing David and Amy to enjoy their happiness without interference from Carol. They chose to organize the wedding far away to prevent Carol from showing up. However, Carol's reaction was intense when Anthony showed her pictures from the wedding. She cried on his shoulders and insisted on his company for a month. Anthony even canceled our planned Colorado trip to make amends with her. Witnessing how he handled the situation left me feeling pretty heartbroken. Despite the certainty that our love ran deep, breaking up was no longer an option. My only hope was that Anthony would come to his senses regarding Carol's troubling behavior. Fast forward 3 years, and Anthony finally proposed to me. Carol, displeased, put on a facade of happiness for him. Yet, I later discovered she had refused to give him her engagement ring, convinced that I was a gold digger and our marriage wouldn't last. I loved the ring Anthony chose for me, a testament to our financial independence as engineers. Carol's jewelry was the last thing I desired. Wedding planning became a nightmare as Carol inserted herself into every aspect, from cake tasting to venue selection. Disapproving of my vintage theme, she deemed it boring and tacky. Despite my indifference, Anthony and I carefully considered every decision. Frustrated, I confronted him, insisting that his mom needed to give us space. This is getting ridiculous. We're the ones getting married, and your mom needs to let us decide on our own. I don't need her input on everything. She hates every decision I make. You need to tell her to back off. Anthony defended his mother, claiming she wanted the best for us, tired of this excuse. I argued that she deserved to be uninvited from David's wedding due to her interference. Though we welcomed her presence, her negative remarks about my choices were unacceptable. This was our wedding, and she already had hers. After much coaxing, Anthony finally asked Carol to back off. Though she threw a fit, she toned it down. Unfortunately, Anthony prioritized her choices and made several changes. Initially sad, I recognized it was also his day and chose to go along in some places to avoid further trouble. I had not yet found the courage to stand up for myself, and Anthony seemed lost in a fog, unable to think clearly. The wedding turned into another disaster when Carol showed up in a white dress so sparkly and lacy that it resembled a bridal gown. Fortunately, Anthony recognized the issue and insisted she changed before the ceremony. Feigning ignorance, Carol claimed she didn't have another dress. However, my maid of honor and best friend came to the rescue, producing a pale blue gown that fit Carol perfectly. Anticipating her intention to wear white, I had purchased a decent dress for her on my dime. With no excuses left, Carol had to wear the provided dress. During the reception, she delivered tearful speeches about losing her children to awful women, targeting both me and Lauren, who were avoiding her. Carol also disparaged our relationship, portraying herself as the victimized mother-in-law. The wedding attendees looked uncomfortable, and even her own family was mortified. My maid of honor swiftly took the microphone, redirecting the atmosphere. On our honeymoon, Carol incessantly called us, reaching out to Anthony and crying about feeling lonely. She bombarded us with 5 calls a day, and when unable to reach Anthony, she called me, accusing me of taking her son away. Just a month after the wedding, she insisted that no matter what I did, he would always choose her over me, asserting that he would never love me more than his mom. Attempting to reason with her, I explained that we were on our honeymoon and she needed to stop calling us so frequently. When Anthony's phone died, he went back to our room to charge it, emphasizing that there was no intention of keeping him away from her. Kathleen, it's clear to me how driven you are by greed. Your sole focus is on extracting money from him, ignoring the fact that he supports me financially and genuinely cares for me, something he's been doing since his father passed away a decade ago. Carol, you may be his mother, and it's natural for him to support you. But I am financially stable on my own and have no interest in his money. Stop falsely accusing me of trying to exploit him. Enough with your baseless accusations. You might deceive him, but I see through your intentions. Hand over the phone to my husband. I need to speak with him urgently. During our honeymoon, I endured numerous conversations like this with Kathleen. When we returned home, dealing with her incessant crying became a daily struggle, all because we didn't take her along. Even now, she scolded my husband for going without her. Anthony, as always, did his best to console his mother, overlooking my concerns. I was gradually finding my voice to stand up for myself. Things were relatively stable until a few months ago when I discovered I was pregnant with our first child. Excitement filled us, and Anthony wanted to share the news with Carol immediately. Despite my reservations, I agreed. However, instead of joy, Carol reacted with tears and accusations. She accused me of trapping him with a baby, insinuating that I had cheated on Anthony. Despite my husband's attempts to calm her, she remained obstinate. I grew weary of her dramatic outbursts, which persisted for 3 weeks before she decided to visit us. Carol arrived unannounced, seemingly happy about our baby, showering me with gifts. Anthony was relieved, thinking Carol had finally accepted our child. The truth, however, was far from that. I felt a sense of unease about Carol's newfound happiness and decided to approach the situation cautiously. In the evening, she offered to make us tea, claiming it would help warm me up as the weather was getting chilly. Anthony appreciated her gesture, giving me a triumphant look as if to say, "I told you so." Choosing not to dismiss my concerns, I excused myself and went to the kitchen to check on Carol. I'd observed her preparing tea and adding something from a carton. Both my husband and I are lactose intolerant, using a specific brand of oat milk for our tea. However, Carol was using a different carton that caught my attention. She used oat milk for 1 cup, but opted for the suspicious carton for the other. Initially, I assumed she was merely using a different type of vegan milk for variety. Despite this, my unease persisted when she handed me the suspicious mug. Feeling a sudden panic, I impulsively switched my husband's cup with mine when they weren't looking. We drank tea, and throughout the evening, Carol seemed to smirk at me from across the couch. Fortunately, nothing untoward happened for the remainder of the night. However, in the early hours of dawn, I heard my husband vomiting in the bathroom. He made several trips, and the noise woke me up. After a while, I saw him lying on the living room couch in pain. Concerned, I approached him and inquired about his condition. Carol, emerging from her room, looked worried at the sight of Anthony's distress, breaking into an ugly cry. It suddenly dawned on me. This woman had used cow milk in our tea. I was prepared to confront her, but before doing so, I had to rush Anthony to the hospital. I urgently dialed 911, requesting an ambulance for Anthony, who was experiencing severe stomach pain and was on the brink of passing out. At the hospital, we waited for the medication to take effect. When the doctor arrived for a consultation with Anthony, I brought Carol along. In the presence of both Anthony and the doctor, I coerced Carol into confessing to everything. She was concerned about her son, so getting her to confess wasn't a challenge. The doctor expressed disappointment and informed us that Anthony needed to be hospitalized for a day. After the doctors left, Anthony seemed troubled. The fog in his mind began to clear, and he questioned Carol about why she used milk in his tea, knowing about his allergy. He pointed out that their household didn't even have cow milk, and I didn't consume it either. Carol insisted that she didn't intend to harm Anthony, claiming she was aware of his milk allergy. Anthony was perplexed and demanded an explanation. Carol continued sobbing in a corner, prompting me to reveal the truth. I explained that Carol brought cow milk into their home, not for Anthony, but for me. It was not meant for him to consume, and I had switched their cups when Carol wasn't looking, prioritizing the health of our child. It turned out to be the right decision. Anthony, shocked and disbelieving, accused me of lying. He couldn't fathom why Carol would want to hurt him and our child. I urged him to ask Carol for an explanation, emphasizing that I had taken precautions to safeguard our child's health. Carol erupted into a cacophony of wails and screams, reaching such a fever pitch that a nurse had to usher her out, a move no one objected to at that point. Anthony, visibly shaken and traumatized by Carol's actions, apologized profusely and pledged to keep her out of our lives. Witnessing Anthony's pain, I'd offered comfort as best I could and took him home the following day. During his hospital stay, I seized the opportunity to change the locks on our house. Anthony called Carol, firmly informing her that we were cutting all contact with her for good. This decision triggered more cries and pleas from her, insisting that as his mother, he couldn't sever ties. Anthony resolutely rejected her pleas, highlighting how her actions had harmed our family. He emphasized that he wouldn't tolerate it any longer. Acknowledging that he had been blind to her detrimental influence, Carol confessed her motivations, admitting that she sought to hurt me and make me suffer because she felt neglected. Anthony, unyielding, deemed her actions unforgivable, especially considering the potential harm if I had consumed the tea she prepared. Expressing his disgust, Anthony firmly rejected her presence and cut off all communication. We changed the locks to prevent her from entering our home, and when she attempted to force her way in, we called the authorities, blocking her on phones and social media. We informed our extended family about the situation, and their unanimous disapproval further isolated Carol. After discussing her actions and reviewing evidence from security cameras and her confession to the doctor, we successfully obtained a restraining order against her. Though she tried to gather information from our extended family, none entertained her demands. We withdrew financial support, prompting her to secure a job at Walmart to support herself. Gradually rebuilding our relationship with David and Lauren, Anthony, and David resolved their issues through a heart-to-heart conversation. Lauren and I, already good friends, strengthened our bond further. My husband, having come to his senses, shielded me from Carol's influence, and we eagerly anticipated the arrival of our child, with an agreement not to allow Carol any relationship with our future family. Enjoying the newfound peace in our household after Carol's departure, we considered moving to David City after our child's birth. Uncertain about the future, we remained positive that we would overcome any challenges together.
It appears my husband has fallen under some devilish influence. I've made the decision to transfer ownership of this house to Susan. Should anyone oppose me, be prepared for the possibility of divorce. My husband intends to bestow our home, registered under my name, to the spouse of our eldest son, a true harpy who should vacate immediately. This conniving wife has manipulated my husband to her advantage, but I shall reclaim what's rightfully mine. I find it rather amusing, really. I can easily manage the monthly mortgage of $1,800 on my own. As it seems, even my eldest son has aligned with her. Well, I no longer hold any sentimental attachment to this decrepit abode. I shall relocate elsewhere. Rest assured, all three of you will face the consequences. Prepare yourselves. My name is Grace, and I am 60 years old. I hold an executive position in a prominent corporation. I reside with my husband, Robert, who is 2 years my junior. Just last year, we embarked on renovating our ancestral home in anticipation of our future. Built by my father, the house had aged considerably and required updates to accommodate our advancing years. However, due to our age and the extensive renovations, the loan amount is somewhat burdensome at $1,800 per month. However, the loan amount is well within our means, and I've been assured of its approval given my executive position in a major corporation. Interestingly, Robert, my husband, manages a small restaurant earning less than me, which seemingly facilitates my loan application process. Yet, solely relying on my income to repay the loan would pose challenges. Although the house originally belonged to your father and is now in your name, I can't help but feel guilty. Would you be able to cover the entire loan amount? In return, I'm more than willing to increase my contribution towards our living expenses. We jointly deliberated on the decision to renovate, and the transformation of our home is nothing short of remarkable. Its newfound beauty and comfort are almost surreal. Renovating the very house I grew up in brought me immense joy, fostering the hope of a lifetime within its walls. I never imagined the day would arrive when I have to bid farewell to this cherished home. Then one afternoon, my phone buzzes with a message. "I'm getting married," announces my eldest son, Jack, through the receiver. At 31, Jack holds a prestigious position as a section chief in a major corporation. He's always been diligent, immersing himself in studies and extracurricular activities, and his dedication has only deepened in adulthood. Despite his achievements, discussions of his romantic life have been scarce. Naturally, I found myself intrigued by the woman Jack intended to wed, a subject of much speculation. What manner of person could she be? If she has captured Jack's heart, she must possess remarkable qualities. Yet, a pang of concern gnaws at me. Could she be scheming, taking advantage of Jack's limited experience in matters of the heart? The anticipation and nerves swirled within me as we awaited the arrival of our son's significant other for the first time. Finally, the day arrived, and a poised woman with chestnut locks draped in a pristine white chiffon dress graced our doorstep. "I'm Susan, pleased to meet you." She greeted us with impeccable manners and a tidy appearance, leaving a favorable first impression. Flashing a brilliant smile, she extended her greetings to both Mom and Dad. Observing her, I couldn't help but feel reassured. Jack could surely be entrusted to her care. It seemed Robert shared my sentiments, his grin mirroring my own. "She's a keeper," he whispered in approval. Susan, catching his words, clasped Robert's hand and met his gaze earnestly. The intensity of the moment left me questioning her motives. What was she playing at? Taken aback by her sudden closeness, I instinctively recoiled, sensing Jack's own surprise, though Robert appeared unperturbed. While I harbored no feelings of jealousy, the encounter left an uncomfortable knot in my stomach. What are you doing?" I questioned, my tone tinged with uncertainty. "Thank you," Susan replied, her response doing little to ease my unease. Sensing Jack's discomfort, I directed my attention towards Susan, only for her to stammer apologetically, "Oh, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have overstepped on our first meeting. I'm truly sorry," hastily releasing Robert's hand. I often hear that I lack awareness of personal space. It's never my intention to cause offense. I just end up doing it. I'm really sorry. Despite her sincere remorse, I couldn't help but feel taken aback by her behavior, a stark contrast to my initial positive impression. But Jack is absolutely smitten with her, even with her unconventional behavior. Robert interjected, his tone tinged with fondness. Susan's lack of personal space is actually one of her endearing qualities. She's the one who took the initiative with me despite my shyness around women. Thanks to her, I've been able to open up and envision a future together. Seeing Jack, who's usually quite introverted, transform like this, well, I trust him in your hands. Despite my initial reservations, I came to realize that Susan was indeed a kind-hearted person. With my approval granted, their wedding plans swiftly fell into place, culminating in a joyous ceremony just a few weeks later. From the depths of my heart, I wish them nothing but endless happiness. 6 months into their marriage, upon returning home one evening, I was greeted by an unexpected sight. A pair of women's shoes sat at the entrance, and in the living room, I found Susan. "Ah, welcome back, mother-in-law," she greeted me cheerfully amidst the scattered remnants of a drinking session. Puzzled by the scene, I couldn't help but inquire, "What's all this? Why the impromptu party without Jack?" Curiosity piqued, I sought an explanation. Well, on my way home from work, I ran into Susan. She expressed a desire to bond, so we opted for a drink. With payday still out of reach, we thought home was the best venue. Robert explained, his tone tinged with amusement. But why not include Jack in the festivities? And I wouldn't want to intrude on the newlyweds' privacy. They could have simply enjoyed a drink at their own place, I countered, tilting my head in confusion. "It could have been fine at our place, but our home is a bit of a mess right now," Susan confessed, her words slightly slurred from the effects of the drinks. "But why drink here together? Why not invite Jack?" I pressed, puzzled by the unconventional gathering. Having a daughter-in-law visit her in-laws for drinks while they're newlyweds? It's a bit unusual, I remarked, scanning the room for any sign of Jack's presence. Jack's swamped with work, and I've been pulling overtime shifts. It's just so lonely. Susan's voice cracked as tears welled up in her eyes. There, Susan. It's not your fault, I comforted, reaching out to console her. Jack is the one to blame for leaving his newlywed wife alone. Robert consoles Susan, gently stroking her hair. Oh, daddy-in-law, I inwardly cringed at the peculiar sight. It was all rather unsettling. Robert, remember your position. Susan is your daughter-in-law. Showing such intimacy is disrespectful to Jack. I reprimanded him firmly, hoping to steer him back to propriety. However, before I could say more, Susan interjected, Please don't scold daddy-in-law. What? I couldn't help but express my bewilderment at her defense of Robert. Though I had much to say, the exhaustion from a long day at work left me devoid of energy. I'm going to take a bath. Please clean up, I sighed, retreating to the bathroom to seek solace. Resolved to address the situation, I dialed Jack's number to explain the bizarre turn of events. He insists he'll leave work immediately to pick up Susan. Understandable. Susan may be a tad eccentric, but Jack's willingness to drop everything for her speaks volumes about their bond. Still, I can't shake the feeling that life with her post-marriage might be a tad challenging. Despite my uncertainties, I resolve to offer Jack some marital advice when he arrives. Lost in contemplation, time slips away as I soak in the tub. Feeling a bit woozy, I make my way to the living room, expecting to find Jack ready to escort Susan home. To my surprise, Jack, despite being the designated driver, is indulging in a drink. Jack, you drove here, right? You shouldn't be drinking, I gently remind him, only to be met with a cheerful, tipsy response. Susan wanted a drink, so I thought we'd make a night of it, Jack explains, his words tinged with joviality. While I'm relieved my son will be staying the night, the presence of the daughter-in-law who's left a less than stellar impression gives me pause. Suddenly, a sense of bewilderment washes over me. I stammer, genuinely puzzled. But before I can protest further, Jack, already well into his drinks, interjects, I could drive you guys home. I don't want Susan to overstay her welcome. Despite my fatigue, I offer to chauffeur them home. However, Jack, ever the gracious host, insists, No, I feel bad. Why don't you join us for a drink? I'm rendered speechless. Something feels amiss. Suddenly, Susan flashes a mischievous grin. It's as if she's mocking my confusion. It's just my imagination, right? I try to convince myself it's a misunderstanding. Little do I know, her elaborate scheme has already begun unfolding. The following day, Susan returned, her apologies pouring forth like a flood. I'm truly sorry, she insisted before promptly leaving. I felt a sense of relief wash over me, as if a tempest had finally passed. However, upon returning home that same evening, I found Susan once again present, with no sign of Jack in sight. A wave of despair crashed over me, though the circumstances differ from the previous day. I apologize for disturbing you once more, but I felt compelled to offer my apologies, Susan expressed, presenting me with a box of sweets. I got carried away. My mistake, Robert chimed in, his remorse palpable. While somewhat irksome, their display of contrition signaled a genuine effort to mend their ways. I forgive you. Thank you, I responded, sensing Susan's discomfort and appreciating their attempt at reconciliation. With that, Susan ceased her visits, sparing me further interaction. To be honest, I was relieved. I had no desire to engage with her any longer. Or so I thought, until one fateful day when Robert approached me with a solemn expression, signaling he had something important to discuss. As I pondered what it might entail and remained in the living room, Jack and Susan returned home. It's been a while, I greeted them, only to be met with silence. Perplexed, I wondered if they hadn't heard me. Suddenly, Robert's voice shattered the silence, declaring, I'm giving this house to Susan. If you object, we're getting a divorce. My mind reeled in disbelief. What was he saying? I couldn't comprehend his sudden proclamation. Mother-in-law, please leave, Susan interjected, her words plunging me into chaos. What? What does that mean? I demanded, my thoughts spinning. Hold on, why are you giving the house to Susan? I pressed Robert for answers, but his response only deepened my confusion. You've been bullying Susan all this time, he accused. Bullying? That's absurd, utterly baseless, I protested, struggling to make sense of the accusations hurled my way. But no matter how vehemently I argued back, Robert wouldn't listen, so shut up. Susan's words hit me like a slap in the face, explaining why she had been in tears, unable to return home until now. Robert's shouting only intensified, while Susan's tears continued to flow. How had things spiraled to this point? Suddenly, Jack chimed in, his voice laden with disbelief. I never imagined my mother would stoop to this. It's beyond messed up. The more I denied the accusations, the more enraged they became. Susan's tears seemed endless. That's it. I'm divorcing you. Leave now. I'm staying here with them, Robert declared firmly. Why should I give my house to Susan? I demanded, incredulous. In response, he shot back, because Susan is deeply hurt. Ordinarily, we demand compensation, but I believe there's a better way. By taking away your prized possession and giving it to Susan, it'll inflict the appropriate amount of damage on you, don't you think? I didn't bully her. Why should I be the one suffering? Besides, Susan quit her job when she got married. There's no way she can afford an $1,800 loan, I argue. Robert's response comes swiftly. Don't worry. We'll put the title in Jack's name. With his salary and his previous employer, we can make the change right away. Despite his assurances, I remain skeptical. Changing the title is no small feat, especially with the loan in place. It's not as simple as just flipping a switch. I doubt the bank will approve it, I counter. Robert, however, remains optimistic. You work for a big corporation, and so does Jack. We should be fine. Besides, I have a friend who works at the bank where you have your loan. I'm sure we can talk to him, and everything will work out. It's baffling where their sudden confidence stemmed from. That's right, an $1,800 loan is a breeze, lol. Jack, emboldened by Robert's assurances, now stands firm in his conviction that I must relinquish the house. Despite my repeated protests, insisting I hadn't bullied Susan and thus wouldn't give up the house, they remain unmoved. Every objection I raise only ignites another heated argument. This is too much, I mutter, growing weary of the ordeal. Through her tears, Susan finally speaks up, her voice trembling with emotion. Mother-in-law, for the sake of this child, please, she pleads, gently caressing her belly. My heart skips a beat as the weight of her words sinks in. No way, Mom. Susan is pregnant, Jack interjects, dropping the bombshell. Given her fragile state, the stress might lead to a miscarriage. So please, reconsider, he urges. Stress during pregnancy is indeed a serious concern, but surrendering my home over baseless accusations seems unfathomable. I'm left feeling bewildered and conflicted. Please just leave me alone for a moment, I murmur, retreating to the bedroom, seeking solace from the chaos unfolding. Doubts gnaw at my mind as I ponder Susan's accusations. Have I unknowingly treated her poorly? I wonder aloud, sinking into the bed, consumed by worry. Then a sudden discovery jolts me from my thoughts. What's this? I gasped, spotting a strand of brown hair on the bedspread. Robert's and my hair are both jet black. There's no plausible explanation for a stray brown strand. Could this revelation hint at infidelity, adding another layer to our already tumultuous situation? My mind reels at the possibility, teetering on the edge of despair. I don't even know what's real anymore. I whisper, tears streaming down my face as I succumb to exhaustion, drifting into a fitful sleep. When I awaken, the room is cloaked in darkness, signaling that night has fallen. As I attempt to make my way back to the living room, voices drift through the air, indicating that Jack and Susan have yet to return home. I wish I could join in for a drink. Robert's voice rings out, brimming with enthusiasm. You can't, remember? You're pregnant, Susan reminds him, her tone equally fervent. Faced with their fervor, I find myself unable to intervene, resigned to the silent turmoil raging within me. Susan's cryptic accusations had left me in a state of despair, unable to bring myself to face the unfolding drama in the living room. Suddenly, the hushed tones of an intimate conversation pierced the silence. "Oh, Susan, I love you," Robert's voice murmured affectionately, followed by Susan's hesitant response, "Stop it, Robert. What if Jack or my mother-in-law finds out?" My heart raced with confusion and disbelief. What on earth are Robert and Susan doing? I muttered to myself, unable to comprehend the scene unfolding before me. Don't worry, Jack is passed out drunk, and Grace hasn't emerged from her room in ages. She's probably fast asleep by now. Robert reassured Susan, his tone laced with amusement. The realization hit me like a ton of bricks. So they've been planning this all along. I realized a surge of nausea rising within me. They kicked me out of my own bed to have their tryst with Susan, hidden from Jack. My home, a mere venue for their illicit affair, I concluded bitterly, feeling utterly betrayed. Fine, I'll let go of this wretched place. But mark my words, there will be consequences. The following morning, I feigned sleep in my room, pretending as though nothing had transpired. Truthfully, I couldn't bear the thought of sleeping in that bed any longer, and the shock of the previous night had rendered sleep elusive. Finally summoning the courage to relinquish the house, I declared, "I've decided to hand over the house." The reaction was immediate. A collective grin spread across their faces. "Fantastic, let's initiate the transfer of ownership right away," Robert exclaimed eagerly. "I'm sure I can secure a loan approval in no time," Jack chimed in, his excitement palpable. It pained me to see him so oblivious, but I refrained from speaking the truth to a son who seemed wholly under his wife's sway. "Not yet," I interjected, delaying the proceedings. In the days that followed, divorce procedures and the transfer of ownership consumed our time and energy. It was a grueling process, but we persevered, ultimately succeeding in changing the ownership. "From today onward, it's no longer your house," Robert proclaimed triumphantly. "Get out of here, old lady, lol." Susan's spiteful whisper sent a surge of anger coursing through me. "I'll leave, you don't have to tell me," I retorted, masking the hurt beneath a veneer of indifference. Surrendering the house I had called home for a lifetime was undeniably sorrowful, but it had morphed into a den of betrayal. Yet, I harbored no regrets. From now on, I'll turn the tables on these three in their twisted dynamic. They'll rue the day they crossed me, I vowed silently. Nearly a month after vacating the premises, I felt ready to execute my plan. Returning to my former home, I hesitated only briefly before ringing the doorbell. "What does a stranger want here?" Robert's voice, tinged with anger, greeted me even after all this time. "May I come in? I have something important to discuss," I stated assertively, unwilling to be dismissed so easily. "Why should I let you in my house?" Robert hesitated, clearly reluctant to entertain my request. "It's for Susan's sake, too. I have something important to share," I insisted, hoping to pique his curiosity enough to grant me entry. The mere mention of her name was enough to sway Robert, allowing me entry without hesitation. Though I felt a wave of disgust at the thought of invoking her name, I knew Robert's weakness for her, so I played that card. "An outsider is here," Robert announced, a term that stung, considering our former marital status. His choice of words irked me, but I pushed aside my irritation, focusing on the task at hand. "What do you want after all this time?" he demanded, the tension palpable in the room. "I want you to look at this," I replied, laying out the photos before them. "What? What is this?" Robert's voice betrayed his confusion as he studied the images before him. "These are," he began, his words trailing off as he recognized the figures in the photos, himself and Susan, captured on what appeared to be a date. In truth, since our divorce. I had enlisted the help of a private investigator to track their movements, resulting in these incriminating snapshots. "Just a moment. What are you trying to insinuate with these photos?" Robert's tone turned defensive, attempting to downplay the significance of the evidence before him. "We're simply a close father-in-law and daughter-in-law, nothing more, nothing less," he asserted, his words ringing hollow in the face of the damning evidence. "Yeah, why are you resorting to such underhanded tactics? What do you hope to achieve by presenting these nonsensical photos?" Susan chimed in, her tone laced with disdain. Despite their protests of innocence, I remained unconvinced. "Well, how about this?" I announced, retrieving my smartphone and playing a recorded conversation. "I really do love Susan." "Hey, if you speak so loudly, Jack and mother-in-law will wake up." Robert's voice echoed through the room, followed by Susan's murmurs. "What? What's this?" Robert's voice trembled with disbelief as he listened to the recording. "Actually, the day I discovered your relationship, I had recorded your conversation," I explained calmly, though my heart raced with anger. "No, this is a misunderstanding," Robert protested desperately, his words falling on deaf ears. "What misunderstanding? This is clearly not acceptable," Jack interjected, his fury palpable. She kept her head down. I added, deciding to stoke the flames further. "Listen, I hate to ask. But who's really the father of that baby in your belly? I pressed, watching as Jack's complexion turned ashen. Is it with a dad? Jack's voice quivered with fear. No way, my father-in-law was pulling out every time. Oh, Susan's words trailed off, a realization dawning upon her too late. You just admitted it, didn't you? You just admitted it. Robert and Jack erupted into shouts, their anger boiling over. In the chaos that ensued, they ended up wrestling with each other, their scuffle abruptly interrupted by Susan's cry of pain as a cramp seized her stomach. I've been saying this all along, haven't I? I haven't been bullying Susan. Could it be that you were lying just to drive me away, to manipulate Jack? I interjected, my voice laced with frustration. Jack recoiled in disbelief. You're kidding. What the hell? That's just messed up with you guys, he exclaimed, his trust shattered. Unable to trust even my own mother, I watched as Jack grappled with the betrayal, his sense of guilt palpable. Now that you understand all this, spill everything, he demanded angrily, his gaze fixed on the two culprits. Reluctantly, they confessed, revealing, we have enough evidence. Here, are we going to court? The mere mention of the word court seemed to loosen their tongues, and they began to speak. Apparently, Susan initially loved Jack, but upon seeing our newly renovated and beautiful home during their marriage proposal, she grew envious. My parents' house was pretty run down, and I was jealous of a beautiful house like this, she confessed bitterly. The interior was quite nice too, she explained tearfully. It became evident that the woman who coveted a home like ours had meticulously orchestrated her plan to win over Robert on the day of the marriage proposal. So she intentionally ambushed Robert after his work without inviting Jack and brought him home. For several months, as Jack remained absent, she cultivated a relationship with Robert and plotted to push me out. Then why not propose to live together from the beginning? I questioned. She paused before replying. I have a negative perception of mothers-in-law. At home, my mom and grandma fought every day because my grandma bullied my mom. I didn't want to subject myself to living with a mother-in-law. The only way to live comfortably in a beautiful house was to get rid of the mother-in-law. Indeed, with such a perception, living with a mother-in-law would be undesirable. But to pursue your father-in-law? What did Robert think about this? I pressed further. I knew I was being manipulated, but when she greeted me with a smile, held my hand, Robert's admission trailed off, revealing his vulnerability. Despite being aware of being used, he seemed to have succumbed to her charm, choosing to abandon me to keep her by his side. You guys, you're the worst. Jack's words hung heavily in the air as the two offenders hung their heads, tears streaming down their faces. Following Jack's natural decision to divorce, he opted to verify the child's DNA, revealing Robert as the biological father. I won't pay child support, Jack declared, demanding compensation from the guilty parties. Of course, me too. I can't believe I'm suing my own father for compensation. I consoled Jack, gently patting his head as he grappled with the shocking revelation. That deceitful woman had upended all our lives, but she would soon come to regret her actions more than any of us. My intuition proved correct. 2 years later, she remarried Robert, choosing to endure their union for the sake of their child. Placing their offspring in daycare, she resumed work. Look, Daddy, Uncle came to pick you up today, she chirped to their child, unaware of the disapproving glances from other mothers at the daycare. The children seemed to be adjusting well, but she's struggling to connect with other moms, feeling isolated. When she attempted to explain her divorce and remarriage to her own parents, their fury was directed at Robert, leading to their estrangement. It's all a consequence of her choices. As for the house, Jack now resides there alone. I contemplated selling it, but couldn't bear to part with it, considering it's been Mom's home since birth, a repository of cherished memories. Despite my insistence that the house felt eerie after everything that happened, Jack couldn't bring himself to sell it due to overwhelming guilt. Perhaps influenced by my constant aversion to the house, Jack arranged for it to be professionally cleaned and cleared out of all remnants of Robert and Susan. Despite his efforts, Jack felt remorseful, acknowledging the pain he caused Mom. Even though it was because of that woman, I did something terrible to Mom. I know you probably won't forgive me, but please visit me or come to the house on a whim, and let me show you some devotion, he pleaded, offering me a ticket for a hot springs trip. Though I'm not ready to forgive him just yet, Jack's remorse has touched me. I'm considering taking steps to rebuild our parent child relationship to what it once was.